Welcome to Civic Warriors, brought to you by Witham. On this podcast, we bring the conversation to you, sharing engaging stories that motivate and build consensus in the nonprofit community. This podcast is about the innovators, the leaders on the front lines of adversity, guiding lights in the nonprofit industry affecting change. And through their stories, we can all join forces to become Civic Warriors. Hey, Warriors. Welcome to today's episode of Civic Warriors, brought to you by Witham. I'm your host, Brad Caruso, leader of Witham's not-for-profit practice. Today's guest is Global Impact President and CEO, Scott Jackson, and Chafi, Director of Programs at Geneva Global. Both organizations are part of Global Impact Ventures, a family of mission-driven entities working across the philanthropic ecosystem. Global Impact is a trusted philanthropy advisor, intermediary, and nonprofit partner offering advisory and infrastructure services. With nearly 70 years of experience, they've raised more than $3 billion for global causes. Their sister organization, Geneva Global, is a certified B Corporation, helping foundations and individuals build a better world, including leading the Speed School, an accelerated education program that gives out-of-school children another opportunity at schooling. Together, they represent two sides of the same mission, strengthening philanthropy from strategy to implementation. And today we're going to talk about how Global Impact Ventures makes a global impact by hearing from Scott and his story and the goals for the organization, and then also shine a light on one of their unique and very successful programs within Global Impact Ventures that Chafi will talk us through. So with all that said, Scott and Chafi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brad, for having us.
Thank you very much.
Really excited to be here. Yeah, really excited for you both to be here and sharing your time and wisdom with our audience today. So, Scott, I'll start over with you. Can you share a little bit more about your background, how you got involved in this industry as a whole, and maybe then go into a little bit about Global Impact Ventures as a whole?
Certainly, Brad. And I'll just share with our listeners that we get the privilege of working with Witham as our audit firm, and we can't thank you enough, Brad, for all that you and your team do for us. It means a great deal, and your expertise in the nonprofit sector with Civic Warriors is very important for such a time as this. So thank you. Brad, my background, a big reason I do what I do comes from my own childhood. And I wrote a book about it called Take Me With You. And the title of the book comes from the fact that my mother was an abused spouse. And every day she would try to escape that situation. And I would say, take me with you. And she did eventually escape that situation. And then she married a Black Baptist minister in Kansas before it was legal to have interracial marriages in the late 60s. And then kind of all heck broke loose in the community on both sides, the white and black sides of the community. And so we were facing a custody battle. And she and my stepfather, Jefferson, again decided they would take me with them. And so we escaped to Vancouver, British Columbia. We didn't have work permits, so we eventually made our way down to Washington State on the Olympic Peninsula border. And there we got on the ferry. And before we got off, a Canadian gentleman came up to us with a felt hat and a feather in his hat. We had maps at the time. And he said, you folks really ought to think about this place called Sequim, Washington. People from all over the world are locating there, and they would accept you. And he walked off. So we got off the ferry and had a hard time getting a taxi in a hotel room, but not as bad as Kansas. And we made our way to Sequim and hid out on a horse ranch for over a year. And then Jefferson started preaching at the local Veterans of Foreign Wars Center, and my mother started doing community work. And they put me back in school. And somewhere along the line, I'd given my biological last name. And so through the school system, they found us, held my mother in contempt of court, and took me by armed escort back to Kansas. I then escaped in a Kansas snowstorm with a green knit hat with $20 bills sewn in it and a Bible with phone numbers across the country. And I made my way back to the state of Washington. And my mom and Jefferson had actually taken the case to the Supreme Court of the state of Washington and overturned it. But unless I was in that state, that really didn't matter. So once I got there, there was a final appeals trial, and I was able to live with my mom and Jefferson. And the reason I share that story is that I was a pretty angry kid. And it was really about love of my mom, Jefferson, and those around me. It was about the other people in my life that helped me choose the positive. And over time, I realized that there were kids like me all over the world, including many of the kids that Chafi and his team work with. And it's about what we do, what the other people do every day in their life, their teachers, their parents, the church, that allows them to choose the positive. And that's really what drives me and has driven my whole career, public, private, and for the most part of my career in the international nonprofit sector. At Global Impact, I'll just share a couple of comments. Global Impact is a 70-year-old organization, and it was formed to be the United Way for the international development sector. So many of your listeners probably are familiar with United Way as a workplace giving federation. And that's what Global Impact was formed to do. In fact, there was legislative language coming out of Congress to encourage an international workplace federation. And so we have 70 years of receiving and distributing funds from federal, state, local workplace campaigns and private sector campaigns like Microsoft and Google. And we still do that work. It looks a lot different today. It's more of a marketing function that we do for the international development community. But more broadly, Global Impact Ventures and Global Impact is a nonprofit intermediary. And we do have as part of our family, Geneva Global, which is a B Corp. And we're all about basically a set of advisory and fiscal sponsorship services that we support essentially for charitable ventures all over the world. This year, we'll do over $500 million in managed charitable funds, and we have 330 staff, and we work across the globe.
It's incredible, your story, first off. I appreciate you sharing that candidly, and appreciate you sharing more information about your background, challenges in growing up, but then also taking those challenges and then turning them into real impact. I think that there's a lot behind that story. And just from my perspective, thank you for everything that you do and bringing all of that to light and putting that energy into Global Impact Ventures. And as I say to my team internally, there's a reason why you're all successful. And I know your leadership has a lot to do with that and has a lot to do with bringing that to the team and growing your team. I mean, it's not easy going from an organization of several employees to several hundred employees. And, there is a lot to that. So really appreciate you sharing that. So Scott, on that same topic and just expanding on it a little further, how do you take all of that background and empower people's vision for good? And you did share a little bit, but why is it so important to you?
Unless people feel their own sense of agency, right, then they aren't able to realize their own potential. So if you start with that everyone is empowered to realize their own potential, it allows our team, I think, to feel that sense of empowerment and really be able to be leaders and be team members with each other. One of the things that we think that is really important is kind of keeping that sense of mutual respect, so that no one has kind of the power over anyone else, but rather we meet each other on equal grounds, regardless of our position and regardless of what we do in the Global Impact Ventures community. Often I think of a saying that was shared with me a number of years ago, which is, as you grow in your leadership role, just remember that a whisper is a roar. So everything you say is amplified. And so, if you're having a bad day or you're upset, the people that are on the other side of that don't understand why, but they do know how it impacts them. So I think of that every day as each of us can be the other person in other people's lives, and being positive about that and meeting them kind of where they are is so important, because that's going to impact their day and impact the work they do. So we try to work together, and Chafi is a great example of that, of a very humble leader who works with his team, kind of meets them where they are.
Appreciate those leadership principles, and certainly, valuable in anyone that does sit on that side of whether it's leading a not-for-profit organization, leading, an accounting firm, leading, whatever your venture is. As the leader, the spotlight is on you, and your actions are under a microscope to a degree. And so, choosing kindness, choosing to, understand the impact that your words have on others. And like you said, all words themselves are heard, so even the smallest thing, smallest of a bad day, it does translate. And so always being mindful of that, and then teaching people that, and I think just having the respect for others is a very, very important thing in the workplace that, in our current worldly temperature has gotten lost a little bit. But, carrying that forward, I think is super important. And I appreciate that you do that. In your introduction, Scott, and sharing more about Global Impact, I know that you operate obviously in the international giving landscape, and you mentioned you operate as an intermediary for giving. Can you explain what that means, operating as an intermediary in the giving space, and what that looks like in practice?
Yeah, so it means that we provide the finance and business support for charitable activities, and they can take kind of several forms, but one form is for initiatives that don't have their own nonprofit status. And so we'll serve as their nonprofit backbone and support their work. For example, we support an initiative called the Beginnings Fund, which is a maternal and child health fund that works with countries in Africa in supporting their maternal and child health systems. And so they don't have their own nonprofit status. So we serve that role and then support their work and their grant making. The other role that we play is for established nonprofits that may also want finance and business services, HR. We provide the HR to those organizations. And we find that it's a little bit different than outsourced accounting because it includes relationship management. It includes implementation of granting programs. It's a very proactive version of accounting and finance business services. And we're finding that accounting and finance and business services are really important in today's world in being able to get charitable dollars where they need to go. So it's a very, very important role that the finance and accounting profession play today.
Without a doubt. And I think your that value that you bring on top of, providing those, traditional services is also the knowledge that you've gained over your career in this industry. And that's an intangible that, I think the accounting profession, like ourselves, don't always have that going into it. And I think, with the various charities you work with knowing how to talk to donors and bringing those dollars in, it's not just we're providing this service, but we're also helping you grow your mission under our umbrella, under our organization as a whole. And that has exponential effects. And I know we see it firsthand as the exponential effects that it does have. So yeah, it definitely adds a layer to it that a traditional service may not necessarily have the expertise in.
And Chafi will share more, but the role that Chafi plays is really not only those back office services, but the technical support to not only programs, but also to our Ethiopia and our Uganda teams. And so he's right in the heart of localization, which is so important around the world, giving local communities and governments the leadership role in their own social impact causes and objectives. But he'll share more with you about that.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm excited to excited to hear a little bit more about that. Last question, and this is more on the giving environment, but I don't always hear a lot about what the international giving landscape looks like. And I know your organization obviously operates in grant making throughout the world. When you think about that, Scott, what are you hearing out there? What are you seeing from a macroeconomic level from that perspective?
Yeah, I think globally you see government funding not being able to be expanded. So in this time of tight budgets, whether it's the US or the United Kingdom or European nations or even African nations, the amount of funding that can go to really important causes is pretty limited. And philanthropy can't really fill that gap because there's not the amount of funding that government can have to bear on a program. But what we have seen in recent years, and particularly in the last couple of years, is we've seen philanthropy be willing to kind of take on really important issues, causes, projects, and take their bite of it. So you see the Gates Foundation really championing after all these years, 20 plus years, vaccines, because they knew they could make a difference in that. We see in the Speed School program, philanthropy understanding that they could really make a difference in accelerated learning. And so that's something they could fund. They have the funding to resource it. And so that's a big trend, is kind of taking a bite of the problem that you can have an impact on in a pretty short period of time. So with the transfer of wealth, I believe that philanthropy will continue to grow around the world. That same transfer of wealth is happening in Africa and Asia as it is in North America. But I think philanthropists being able to work together is another trend we see, and then being able to really identify what part of the problem or issue or geography can they really have an impact on. And I think the last thing I'll say is that that's very encouraging to governments, because they can then really think about taking the lead on their own education programs, but philanthropy coming alongside in the strategy that the government is trying to drive through. So you see multilateral and government funding able to take the lead. And even though it's limited, philanthropy can come alongside and support that work rather than completely separate projects.
Interesting. And on that, I know one of the programs we're going to get into and talk a little bit further about the Speed School. And I guess as you kind of drill into that further, Scott, and share more about it, can you share that bright spot that you have found with the Speed School, or we could turn that over to Chafi?
Chafi will really give you a much better explanation. But essentially, you have children all around the world that are not meeting grade level. In fact, we fiscally sponsor a program here in the United States called Learning Heroes. It's very similar to Speed Schools in the sense that that's the target audience. And often parents don't know where their children are at in terms of their math and reading levels and grade levels. And so there is this really important and unique opportunity to make sure that parents and schools all around the world have enough resources that they can support those kids and get them to grade level and beyond. And that's really what Speed School does.
Love it. And it's so critical, coming from a different background, but I have 2 young kids. My kids are 7 and 9, and I see both of their development, just boy and a girl, and just having, they're both completely different with how they learn things. One of them picks up everything right away. The other one doesn't. and some of them you have to be really involved with. Some of them you don't. Childhood education is a very challenging topic. I can only imagine that challenge globally, different markets, different environments that exist. So absolutely is an integral program, and something that is very important that we focus on is the education of our next generation and around the world, not just our own children. So I appreciate you're doing that. And, I definitely want to drill into that further and kind of, hear from you, Chafi, a little bit more about you. Let's talk a little bit about your background. Let's talk a little bit about what drew you into this work, and maybe share a little bit about how you got to today.
Thank you, Brad. And seriously, thank you for having us on the podcast. It's a really good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about the programs. So thank you. In terms of my background, I was born in Morocco, and I got my bachelor's degree there in English language and linguistics. I always wanted to go abroad. I wanted to study somewhere else and continue. I think the dream was more like to go back to Morocco and then teach at the university or something like that. I was lucky to meet a person, Helen Boyle, who became a good friend of mine for 3 decades now or something. And she introduced me to international development because she was working there. And I was hooked with international development. I just really loved it. And I thought that this is a good opportunity to help in the world. Back in 2002, when I was finishing my master's degree here in the US, I started consulting with some international organizations, and also after that, working with these international organizations to support their work in mostly in Africa at the beginning, and basically just as a support their effort in helping teachers, students, other education stakeholders in Guinea, Mali, and some other countries. I think by now I worked probably in 20 plus countries. Mostly in Africa, the Middle East, and some in Asia as well. And then in 2022, I joined Geneva Global because I was really intrigued by the Speed School program. I was like, that's kind of interesting the way they're doing things here. I didn't know much about it, to be very honest with you. I just like, oh, okay, this is kind of really neat. And then 4 years later, I'm still here.
Love it. Storied background. Yeah.
Yep.
How many countries have you visited?
So far, 47.
47.
I think so.
Worldly
Yeah,
traveler.
47.
Yeah, love it. Love it. So overseeing and directing this Speed School, maybe share a little bit more with our audience so we give a little more context here about the Speed School model itself. What, in your opinion, what's making it effective? How is that running? We can go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Speed School is an accelerated education program. So basically, we try to give kids who either did not go to school at all, or they dropped early on when they don't have any literacy and numeracy skills. They have not gained any literacy and numeracy skills. We give them the opportunity to go back to school, basically. So just something interesting. A couple of days ago, there was a report from UNESCO that says about 273 million children and youth are out of school right now in the world. That's a big number. That's like 1 out of 6 of all kids are out of school, which is really, really bad. So with Speed School, we try to address some of that. We try, especially in Ethiopia and Uganda. What we do is we take kids who are approximately the age of 9 to 14. And if you have a kid who is like 14, it's really hard to send them to first grade. They're not going to fit. They're not going to learn. They will be humiliated and all that stuff. Well, we take these kids who are 9 to 14. We give them condensed curriculum. We teach them for 10 months. And during those 10 months, we cover 3 grades, grade 1, 2, and 3 altogether. So by doing this accelerated method, they will be able to join a grade school and go back straight to grade 4. The vast majority of them go straight to grade 4. By the age of 13, 14, if you join grade 4, you will do well. So this is just a transition for the kids to go back from not being at school at all to going to conventional schools. So one thing that I would like to highlight here, and this is something to some extent unique for Geneva Global, very few organizations do that as well. We do this not for refugees only, but also for the national kids for that country, which is really interesting because a lot of accelerated education programs, they focus more on the refugees, and that's important. But then when we do it also with the kids from the country itself, we help those kids as well. So this is something unique about the program. Historically speaking, when the kids finish the 10 months of this accelerated education program, they sit for a placement test. We don't do the placement test ourselves. It's the government that does that to make sure that the kids are at a level where they can join certain grade. About 95% of all the kids who start the program, they finish the program, which is very high. And then out of those 95% who finish the program, 75% of them go to grade 4, which is also very, very high. The rest, like 25% of those who finish the program, they go to either grade 3 or even grade 5 in some cases, which is amazing. So they excel really well to the extent that they can go to grade 5. One thing that I would like to add about Speed School, there's a lot of information I can share about Speed School, but two things I would like to add. One is that how do we achieve that? We focus on creating a joyful environment for the kids. We would like the kid to learn faster. And to learn faster, you have to create an environment that helps them do that. So we focus on student-centered pedagogy. We focus on methodology that does not focus on the teacher. It focuses on the kids themselves. We put them in small groups. The teacher, we don't even call them a teacher. We call them facilitator because he or she just moves around between a small group here and here and here and work with this group or with that group. The groups themselves are learning from each other. They're not learning from the teacher alone. They're learning from the others as well. So the environment itself is very, very conducive for learning. They learn faster that way. If you see also the Speed School class, there's a lot of materials in the classroom that they can use. Papers all over the place. They can use this for that reason, this like multiplication tables. There's locally sourced materials that they use to create things, to play with, to learn with. So the environment itself is conducive for them to learn. That's why they learn faster. There's one other element I would like to highlight is that for the Speed School, which we call the self-help group. So we wanted to address the main reason why, or one of the main reasons why the kids don't go to school in the first place. And that is the parents, they depend on them for daily chores or some income generating activities in the local market or stuff like that. So what we do is that we bring the parents of the Speed School into the self-help groups. And we create them into a group where we provide them with training. Some of them is literacy numeracy for the parents because they themselves don't know how to read and write. Some of the trainings focus on income generating activities. And we provide them with some financial injections and stuff like that so that they can start savings. And in many cases, they create their own small businesses. So when they create those small businesses, we have seen that they don't only provide for themselves at that moment, but they sustain their kids when they go back to the conventional schools. So after they finish the program and the kids go back to school, the parents, they don't depend on them because they have some income coming in. So they will be able to let the kids continue their education in the normal schools. So that has been very helpful as well as a component for the Speed School program.
Love it. Yeah, I love sharing all that detail you just shared. And it sounds like it's a very community-driven model. So you have children learning from other children. You have kind of like a little bit of a pay-it-forward concept, as well as you have integration of family members in there as well. And it sounds like that's an element that is really driving success with it from what I heard you say.
That's very true. And learning for the kid is not just for the student and in the classroom. The parents contribute. If the parents don't see the importance of this, they will not. And as a result, it's not going to be very helpful for the kids themselves. We really focus on several elements of the program at the same time. One is the teaching that happens in class, but that's only one part of it. The other is the economic activities for the parent, which is another part. The other part also that is equally important is the supportive supervision that we provide to the facilitators. And in many cases, you find that the teachers receive like one visit from an inspector or supervisor that works more administratively to see if he or she is doing the work. We have these inspectors, who don't even call them inspectors, supervisors, who come 3 or 4 times, and then they provide assistance to the teacher to learn from them, like what's the challenges, how to address something better. So the supportive supervision is also a key importance of this as well.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Scott mentioned before, international funding landscape. There are governments that fund things, governments that don't fund things. There are different types of funding throughout the world. How is the funding model working with this concept of the feed school? And, how are you being successful with that funding model?
2 things. One, I think the first thing I would like to highlight is that we have been, to some extent, lucky to have a funder, a trust-based philanthropy, basically. It's a company in Europe that has been funding the program, and they really see the importance of this work. So they gave us a lot of flexibility in terms of implementing. And this flexibility is very helpful because it helps us in terms of adjusting the model, because we have different population in different areas. If you go to Ethiopia, for example, the kids in the highland area is not the same as the kids in the other areas because of the geographic location, because of the weather, because of other things. And we have to adjust our model based on the population of this area. And having a funder who has been very understanding and helpful and trusting our work has been very, very good. So this is something that's super, super important. And we at Geneva Global and Global Impact Ventures in general, we are always looking for funders who share the same vision. Like they think of these, that's not something that's going to have an effect one time and then we stop, but it goes like in the long term. And we've been working with these funders for a long time. We also have other funders like UNICEF and other organizations that's bought into our model. They really liked what we're doing and they started funding our programs. Actually, a lot of cases, they come to us with ideas and then we work with them to implement those. So that's something really important. The other thing that I would like to mention here is that our speech school classes usually there are different models, but most of the time we have about 36 kids in a classroom. So 36 kids, and it costs us about, depending on the region and the country and all that, it costs between $5,000 to $7,000 to set up a speech school class and its associated self-help group and everything else that's going to go with it. So when we think about it that way, like between $5,000 to $7,000, the return on investment is actually really big because at that moment we talked about 95% of the kids graduate or move to the next level. So out of the 36 kids, 34 will go to conventional schools. So 34 will go to conventional schools. A lot of the parents will have their own a small business that they can generate an income for them and for their families. Teachers, not only our facilitators, but also teachers in the schools where the speech school classes are hosted. The teachers there, we train them as well. The rationale behind it is that when we train the facilitator, they do they lead the lessons in the classroom, yes. But then when we train the teachers in the host schools themselves, the kids, when they finish this speech school class, they will go to these conventional schools. And we don't want to have that gap between, they were learning a certain way, but then the teachers in the conventional schools are not trained in the same way. So we don't want to have a smooth transition into grade 4. So we train those teachers. And we also work with the government, not just that. I mean, with the government in Ethiopia in particular has adopted the program in unprecedented ways. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. In my 25 plus years of experience in international development, I've never been a government adopt a program like this one. They have done really amazing things in terms of setting up a speech school unit. They call it speech school, not another accelerated education program. They call it a speech school unit within the government, both at the central level and in the many regions of the country, because Ethiopia is a federated country. So the regions have more independence in terms of education. So they have done that. They integrated in their 5-year plan. They have integrated in the image system. they have taken a lot of important steps to ensure that the speed school is integrated in the system there. More importantly, I would say about 90% of the funding for all accelerated education programs in Ethiopia right now is done by the government. And this is not something we see very often. This is something that's really, really important.
Very important to understand. And that impact is incredible, but also it just highlights the additional layers of challenges that I imagine a lot of people don't think about always is I funded this program, but then what about after that program? What's the next step there? So hearing that, I can't do the math in my head, but if 34 out of 36 children graduate onto further education and then continue in the school system, I mean, that's phenomenal. So now you've impacted those lives and then they're going to carry that forward. But also if you look at that challenge of going from this model, which was working, and then going to different school districts, different school systems. And I can't say I'm familiar with how in Ethiopia or different places, how the school systems operate. But I imagine that there are variations depending on where that individual goes, as you said, based on region, based on location. And so that is a really complex problem. So the fact that you're finding ways to overcome that challenge, I think is really, really enlightening to hear. And I appreciate you sharing more about that. Can you share maybe a couple more, I'll call them successes and failures that you've learned with respect to the speed school, and focus on the successes or whichever way you want to go, because this is always a good learning experience for a lot of individuals that are trying to make an impact in the world. So anything you want to share on that front?
Oh, definitely, yes. I think in terms of successes, for us, when we think about 36 kids in the classroom, if we do the math, it's probably like 36 translate to about 108, because we have 36 kids who are studying 3 grades in one period of 10 months. So we're affecting them quite a lot. And just related to that, a couple of years ago, we commissioned an organization in Uganda to conduct a study for us and on speed school and how the kids do after they finish and all that stuff. And one of the findings that they shared with us was very interesting, is that the cost of educating preschool kids was about 57% less than having those kids go through the conventional school for 3 years. So it is also cost effective in that way to get these kids back to school in a slightly less money, to be very open about it. So that's one thing. I think in terms of also successes, it's a question of I talked a little bit about government adoption, and it's really something important. The reason I focus on the government adoption is that we cannot bring a program to scale without the government of any particular country. So we work with the government really hand in hand, especially in Ethiopia. We do as well in Uganda, but slightly less. I'll talk about it as one of the challenges. But in Ethiopia in particular, we work hand in hand with them because we would like them to take over this program eventually. As we mentioned at the very beginning, the number of out-of-school children is quite a lot. So there's always, for lack of a better word, demand, which is really necessary to address. So to have the government itself take over and then do this, that's really really key. One of the challenges, or I would like a couple challenges here. When we scale a program, there's always a question of quality that becomes questioned. So we have to ensure that the quality stays the same. So when we scale, we work with the government, we work with the local partners who implement in different areas, who try to ensure that the quality stays the same. And that's really important for us. And in terms of the challenges, I think I mentioned a lot about the adoption program in Ethiopia as being a very good successful. In Uganda, it's been a little bit hard to get the government to adopt it the same way. Different countries have different realities, and that's part of the challenge. We're still working with them. We're actually working with the districts. The districts, they are implementing the program with our technical assistance, but it's not just the same level of adoption that we see in Ethiopia. I would like to get them to there at some point of time, but for the time being, it's still hard.
Yeah. No, totally agree with that. Appreciate you sharing that. So obviously both of you are contributing to an impact, a global impact, as we say. You have a legacy in this space. Both of you are leaving your legacy in that space and really working hard to grow that legacy. Scott, I'll start with you. What do you want the next generation to pick up from everything that you've done and all of your teachings and leadership in this philanthropy space? What do you want the next generation of folks to take away?
I think that, first of all, that kind of regardless of your professional career, whether it's in the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector, there's a real opportunity to connect with the world. So the world is, as we often talk about, very small. We're all connected in much more immediate ways than we were even a year ago. And so to really think about what's the combination of your passion, your skills, what you like doing every day, and then what part of the world do you want to have an impact in? And it could be your own family, it could be your community, it could be global education. So I think there's just this tremendous opportunity for the generations today and tomorrow to be able to have really their own social impact agenda.
I love that. Very well said, and not easy to do, but certainly, getting out in the world and connecting with others is an integral part of that. Combining what you enjoy doing with helping others is another part of that. And as you said, there are tremendous opportunities, and I think we have to open our eyes to that and really be cognizant of that. It's also not easy. I think a lot of the world, I see with my children, they ask Google a question and Google tells them the answer. I'm like, kids, the world's not that simple. And then they ask Dad a question, and Dad's like, I don't know the answer. They're like, come on, Dad, why don't you know the answer? Google knows the answer. And I'm like, stop. All right, you got to venture out there and learn some things. But paying that forward and passing that forward and giving people those opportunities is super important, and then having them, shine in those opportunities. Really appreciate
Brad,
that.
You're a great example. I mean, you're continuing to grow in your own leadership with them. And you also are drawn to kind of the nonprofit sectors where you can see the impact of your clients. And then you're able to amplify it through this podcast and other ways to support the sector. So, that's kind of the formula that we all have to kind of look for. And I think our children will immediately gravitate to those kind of formulas.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Finding that place that you can make, as you said, finding that place that you can make that impact. Love it. Chafi, from your perspective, all the impact that you've had, all the successes, what would you want that next generation of leadership to pick up from your leadership in your role?
I dream of the day when our jobs in international development are not needed. That would be a really good day when everywhere in the world people are taken care of by their own population, by their country, and others like supporting each other. I think we are a long, long way from that, unfortunately, but because there's really a lot of issues in the world, both in education and health and other areas as well. But definitely, I would like to encourage the next generation to give importance to equity in the world. I think this is really important. And whether it is whatever the area you think you care about, it can be education, can be justice, can be any other health, can be any topic. But if we give importance to that and help in whatever way possible, you can take action, you can financially support something, you can help find a solution to a problem, contribute in any way possible. Just by paying attention to that and contributing to that, that will be an opportunity to create a more just world.
Love that. And no gift is too small, whether it's a gift of dollars, a gift of time, a gift of your energy, a gift of your compassion. There's no gift that's too small. So
absolutely,
yeah, very valuable advice.
Absolutely. I give a very small example. From time to time, we have interns from one of the universities that we work here in the US, and they send us these interns that they will go to either Ethiopia and Uganda, and they support the team there and work with them. This intern spends about 3 months and then help the program there. That's a contribution. And that contribution will help the program and the student and the kids in that country, but it will help also that intern himself or herself. They will learn something, they will contribute, and then they will be more thinking about how we can improve the world. So this is just another example of how you can support. There's a ton of ways to do that. Definitely.
How can the public help support global impact ventures more? So a lot of what I like to do is appeal to the world, and like you said, everyone has a different cause or passion that they are passionate about, and they hear things. I mean, it's listening to this, I'm sure you've learned a lot and have a valuable insight into how global impact ventures in a very, very small scale. I mean, there's a lot more that you all do make an impact in the world. How can the public find out more about global impact ventures? How can the public help you?
I think the public can help us by thinking about their own social impact journey and the causes that they support. And certainly if international education is one of them, they could go to the Geneva Global website and learn more. and reach out to Chafi. But more broadly, I think really thinking about the causes and the issues that they want to have an impact on. And that helps global impact because our job is to support those causes. Chafi, anything you would add?
Sure, yeah. I think I was going to say something similar, Scott. I think two things here in my mind come to my mind right now. One is that just caring about some topic that's going to have an impact on other people. That's step number one. And then number two is just like reaching out. We are here. If some areas of interest is the same what we are working on, like international education or other areas that Global Impact Venture is working on, we'll be very happy to hear from you and discuss with you what you want to do. And we try to help everybody in meeting their goals. And by doing that, we are supporting the others as well. So I think Scott mentioned it right when he said like we are kind of the intermediary here. So we're working in between the audience and the beneficiaries.
One thing I had a guest on recently, and he provided me his most recent book recommendation, and I love hearing. Because I like reading. I like hearing more about what people care. What people read about, what people are interested in. So I'll start with you, Chafi. What was your most recent book that you would recommend?
I'm currently reading a novel by what's his name, David McCloskey. It's called The Persian. I mean, the story is very entertaining and captivating and everything, but then with whatever happening in the world right now, in the war in Iran and everything, I'm not sure if it is the best time to read it or the worst time, but it's a really good book.
Got it. What about you, Scott?
Folks that are interested in learning more about philanthropy, there's a great kind of newsletter called Inside Philanthropy that would probably be interesting because it has a lot of information about donors as well as nonprofits.
Love it. Love it. Appreciate that. Good. Well, obviously had a lot of information shared today, a lot more about Geneva Global, about global impact as a whole, about the impact that you all are making on the world, both on a local level as well as on an international level. Really value and appreciate both your time and wisdom and kind words that were shared here, as well as just sharing more about the impact that you're having. It's very important that we continue to focus on that and help others. And I love your message. I love the effort and the time and dedication that you spend to making that impact, and really appreciate your time sharing that with our audience and being on our show today.
And thank you, Brad, for letting us be a part of the Civic Warriors.
Thank you, Brad, for having us on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you as well. Appreciate your time. And Warriors, thank you for listening. Subscribe and meet us right back here for another episode of With Them Civic Warriors. Hope everyone has a great day. Bye, everybody.